You know what always has me wondering? What kind of games are out there that most of us don't know about or may never experience? A lot of games fail to claim a position in the market due to lack of interest and attention on behalf of consumers, and thus investors unwilling to provide strong support for the product. Another reason is that games are not always available worldwide. Think of the Final Fantasy series, where of the first 6 entries, only 3 got released outside of Japan until various remakes and re-releases years later, and Mother 3 from the Earthbound series, a title that has never left Japan at all. Pulseman on the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive suffered a similar fate. The game was published in Japan by Sega in 1994, but has never seen a physical release elsewhere. It was available for North American consumers via the Sega Channel, and at the time a revolutionary service which allowed gamers to stream digital games to their consoles through cable television. But the game would remain completely unknown to all other regions for a long time, and the Sega Channel had never attracted most of the American market. Even today, Pulseman manages to stay under the radar of many gamers, but the fact it was developed by Game Freak, however, has helped raising awareness for it. Yes, that Game Freak, the team responsible for one of the biggest gaming franchises of all time, which also spawned one of the most popular anime series of all time. Many ideas and concepts implemented in Pulseman carried over to the Pokémon game, so in a way you could say it is the spiritual predecessor to Pokémon, even though the two are drastically different types of games. I had never played Pulseman before, but after reading positive things about it online, I gave it a go and decided to turn it into a review after finishing the Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 video. It is the year 1999, where scientist and computer engineer Doc Yoshiyama created the world's most advanced artificial intelligence named Sea Life, a self-aware woman who is capable of thinking and feeling. Yoshiyama fell in love with his own creation, driving him to digitize and upload himself into his computer to make love with Sea Life. Mixing his DNA with her program core, the outcome was a half-human, half-AI boy named Pulseman. Yoshiyama's brain and body have become corrupted and twisted after living in the digital world for so long, turning him into the evil Waruyama. Upon leaving his computer, Waruyama invades the real world with a cyber-terrorism group known as the Galaxy Gang. As the hero who Pulseman is, he takes on the task of destroying his own father and the Galaxy Gang to save the world. Weird, but good enough for me. There's no narrative, no animations, no voice acting, and no storyline to harp on, so we can dive straight into the game. Pulseman's gameplay is often seen as a hybrid between Sonic the Hedgehog's fast-paced platforming and Mega Man's running and gunning. I'd say that description is pretty point on, though I feel Pulseman is more of its own thing that merely took inspiration from the two. You have to make your way through 7 stages consisting of multiple areas with different challenges. Mostly platforming and taking down enemies that stand in your way, but also some puzzle solving from time to time. Our hero is capable of doing basic acrobatics like jumping and doing physical damage, but he's unique in the way that he can build up static electricity by running or insta-dashing. The electric buildup allows Pulseman to fire charged projectiles at foes, move across high voltage wires for fast traveling, or use the Volt Tacker, a move that launches him off the ground in a 45-degree angle and bounces him off of walls upon contact. Playing Pulseman takes practice and experience, and you won't be able to realize his full potential until you've become more familiar with the game's mechanics. The controls are solid, but Pulseman's momentum is something you'll have to get accustomed to. After walking straight for a brief moment, he will instantly pick up the pace without any sort of build-up in between, which can have you run into enemies or fall into a bottomless pit starting out. And jumping off the ground is comparable to Sonic 2006 in the sense that when you tap a direction in mid-air, Pulseman will keep moving in that direction until he lands. This can evoke minor irritation when avoiding obstacles and platforming in general, though you're not required to make precise movements very often, so that compensates. What bothers me the most on the topic of momentum is that jumping in a specific way, of which I am not sure how, for some reason gives you less horizontal distance than usual, which potentially has you dropping into a bottomless pit below while you are expecting to land safely further ahead. By no means is this an intolerable hurdle for newcomers to overcome, fortunately, and once you have a better grasp of the way Pulseman handles and how to utilize his abilities appropriately, you'll find that your experience becomes a lot more comfortable and above all, fun. Not only can you deal with dangerous circumstances swiftly, you also discover various methods of bypassing obstacles and rescuing yourself from certain deaths. That's one of the biggest factors for a well thought out game in my opinion. It's not impossible to complete on your first try due to returning trial and error design, but acquiring skills by experimenting with the game's intricacies makes it easier and opens up new ways to approach things, giving the player an incentive to replay the game. I believe the level layouts generally complement Pulseman's ability well enough to give the game its own identity. The stages contain a couple of gimmicks that none other than Pulseman could tackle, whether you must reach the top of the area via a maze of the aforementioned high current wires, or pass through small gaps by performing the Volt Tacker at the correct position. Aiming the Volt Tacker is taken to a serious degree in the bonus stages, where you have to hit every block in the room within a minute, which grants you points for extra lives and a huge bonus if you manage to clear the stage. As I just said, platforming in a traditional fashion is possible most of the time in the regular stages, but building up your charge and manipulating it at the right time may allow you to proceed in ways perhaps not fully intended by the developers. The game also takes a few pages from the Sonic playbook, as out-of-the-box thinking is almost always rewarded, either by means of extra lives and such, or a shortcut to a section further up in the level, adding another element of rewarding gameplay to the mix. However, while the level design is built around the defining features of Pulseman and allows for some exploration, I found it to be pretty underwhelming from a general platforming perspective. You jump over a pit or ride a moving platform here and kill an enemy there. In essence, that describes any platformer, but the two rarely ever correlate. It's either one or the other in most situations. As such, you won't find yourself pressured to make decisions quickly very often. Not helping is that the platforming itself is rather basic and straightforward with easily avoidable hazards, and that enemies are total wimps and sort of hard to come by to begin with. I also think there are missed opportunities when it comes to the gimmicks implemented specifically for Pulseman. Guiding yourself through a wire maze for instance is cool, but I would have liked to see more depth in it. All you have to do to progress is switch to the appropriate wires at the right time. That's fine when introducing players to this mechanic in the early stages, but later parts of the game don't add any sort of twist to it. Where are the obstructions and enemies to test you and keep you alert, for example? I feel such additions would have made these sections more intense and thus more exciting. I did notice some development in the level design as I got further and further into the game, with more demanding object and platform arrangements, but it's still nothing to write home about. I should stress, I don't think the level design as a whole in Pulseman is of poor quality with the positives I've talked about earlier in mind, but too many areas just felt kind of inconsequential to me, and they only get easier on repeated playthroughs. Every cloud has a silver lining though. While I view these points as shortcomings, they can make Pulseman a solid starting point for those who want to get into old-school platformers or 16-bit gaming in general. The overall difficulty is just right for them in my eyes. The game is not too easy, neither too hard and frustrating. It requires little knowledge on the stages in order to beat them, and the amount of challenge given to the player scales naturally. To advanced gamers such as myself, the difficulty level doesn't really hit that point where I would deem it as satisfying to overcome, but for the inexperienced, it most likely will. This is why I would have appreciated a difficulty selection in the options menu to appeal to a broader audience and increase replay value. The boss fights are definitely the toughest parts of Pulseman, though the balancing between one another is off. Half of them require some healthy reflexes, while the other half can be defeated by mindlessly spamming the attack button and on the occasion dodging a predictable attack. On the bright side, these encounters are largely compelling conceptually. It took me a good while to figure out how to beat the clone in stage 5. This odd robot ball thing in stage 4 has numerous strategies it will use against you, and I cracked a smile during the battle against the mini Waruyamas raining down on you in stage 7. Now, even though Pulseman isn't as tough to beat as a lot of other games in the early 90s, it is, however, troubled by some unintentional flawed design. By that I mean the camera is a bit too close to Pulseman if you ask me, and it cannot be controlled in any way, shape or form. It's fixed with him centric for the entire game. At times, enemies or obstacles will appear on screen with little to no time to react to them, and you'll have to be wary of pits and spikes you may run into all of a sudden, especially so with Pulseman's momentum having a learning curve to it, as I've said before. The fact you cannot always tell if there's a safe landing ground below you or not enforces my opinion that your field of view is on the limited side, and enemies randomly blindsiding you is cheap whichever way you look at it. To be fair, these things happen too infrequently to justify harsh criticism, but I do not feel like sweeping what is ultimately bad game design under the rug. Better get used to that if you plan to watch more of my videos, because that's how I roll. The visuals for the digital world tend to mess with your eyes and disorient you too. I mean, who thought this was a good idea? These are some of the loudest and most seizure-inducing backgrounds I've seen in a video game. I can appreciate the crazy artistic design, and if you are capable of withstanding rapidly flashing colors, then these backdrops may be the closest thing to an LSD trip without the downsides of actually taking LSD. But pushing it so far that the game is effectively rendered unplayable for people suffering from epilepsy is definitely a problem in my book. When you're not ridding computer systems from evil monstrosities though, you'll find yourself visiting a handful of countries across the globe, all varied in appearance and a pleasure to observe in their own right. The last stage in particular is oozing with creativity, and I love it because of that. On top of that, Pulseman sports some of the most advanced graphics you will come across on Sega's 16-bit wonder, with parallax scrolling abundant and character sprites and animations, as well as the stage environments themselves, have a considerable amount of detail in them. The audio also got significant attention during development. Sound effects are precisely what you expect them to be, voice clips are pretty clear and understandable for the time,
due to the efforts of Pulseman, the case was completely solved.
And the soundtrack plays to the strengths of the Yamaha 2612, the FM sound chip found inside the Genesis/Mega Drive. Okay, that's getting annoying, so I'm calling it the Mega Drive from now on. Well anyway, I definitely got some Pokémon vibes from certain songs. I have never fancied Pokémon compositions to the degree I would listen to them outside the game, same goes for Pulseman honestly, but taste in music is very subjective, so that's not a valid criticism. I am really keen on the Neo Tokyo tune, so that's at least something, and seldom is any piece of music reused. Even the bosses all have their own unique themes, which is effort I admire. Not anywhere near my favorite soundtrack on the system, but I'd be an idiot to claim Junichi Masuda was not a proficient composer for Pulseman. Overall, Pulseman is not at all a bad game, but one that makes me sad a sequel never saw the light of day. I say that in both a positive and negative way. It offers a handful of original ideas for this standard side-scrolling platforming formula. Pulseman himself is a neat and fun character to control once you get the hang of him, one who gives freedom in how you play the game, and the graphics and sound are great for the console standards. However, the average level design sticks out like a sore thumb and doesn't fully realize the potential of some of its implemented gimmicks. A subsequent installment would have given the developers an opportunity to fine-tune the groundworks they had already established and come up with more sophisticated stages in order to create a truly magnificent game. Even if not much were improved, I still enjoyed the existing game enough to play more of the same anyway. It's just that if you already have a ton of platforming experiences, new and old, under your belt, Pulseman is nothing to gush over with its simplistic stage layouts and the lacking difficulty level they span. It depends on the wishes and expectations of the individual, how much that influences their time with the game though. So if you are new to the realms of retro side-scrolling goodness, or just seeking a game from that time period you have yet to try out, Pulseman deserves your attention. Pokémon fans also ought to check it out for all the ideas that would later inspire the Pokémon franchise. And the obviously present Game Freak charm is going to be the cherry on top for them. Owning the original cartridge for your Mega Drive will come at a steep price, so praise Nintendo and Sega for releasing the game internationally on the Virtual Console in 2009. Next up is a mini marathon focusing on a selection of titles for the Sega Mega Drive developed by Treasure. It all began with Gunstar Heroes, so until then.